After Sidious's death, the Imperial regime went into collapse, but what if one Imperial Admiral was able to take over? What would have happened if Thrawn took over after Sidious's demise?
At last we meet in this theater of war, however briefly. There is no escape and your forces are badly outnumbered. This rebellion ends today.
We'll never surrender to you, Thrawn.
You misunderstand, Captain. I'm not accepting surrenders at this time. I want you to know failure, utter defeat, and that it is I who delivers it crashing down upon you. Now, let us proceed.
So we don't really know what happens to Thrawn, but for this theory we're going to say that he's still in command of the 7th Fleet when he hears about the Death Star being destroyed along with the Emperor. Instantly there's a struggle for command, and Thrawn decides that he wants to take charge, so what does he do? So Thrawn, unlike many other Imperial commanders, knows that the rebels are the biggest threat, whilst the other Moffs and commanders begin to argue and refuse to work with one another. So Thrawn wants to take on the rebellion and deal with it before it becomes too powerful, as more and more civilians begin to join the cause. But how does Thrawn get this support? So, many Imperials didn't like Thrawn simply because he was alien, but Thrawn can't take on the rebels alone with his fleet. He needs a lot more ships, but how does he get the other Imperials to support his campaign? Well, as we know, Thrawn was a master strategist, and he had an in-depth knowledge of how the Imperials worked. For this reason, I think it's totally believable that he could manipulate the other Imperial commanders into doing his bidding, possibly by pretending he would support them grab power after the rebels were dealt with. And although Thrawn wasn't particularly liked, that kind of support would be very useful for anybody wanting to take the reins of the Empire. So we'll say Thrawn manages to accumulate about 3 fleets and a decent amount of military force. What would he do? Well, Thrawn's incredibly tactical. He'd likely target the rebels where it hurt the most. Their leadership, strategic hot points where they dock their ships, and where their leadership was based, and probably Coruscant. Yeah, even though it was the Imperial capital, it would be essential that the old relics of the Old Republic couldn't rise up as they did in our timeline, and I think Thrawn would know this, so he'd probably definitely wipe out all of Sidious's old political rivals who would support the reformation of the Republic, and after he took out the rebels' capability to grow, he'd then use his fleet to wipe out the main military of the rebellion. So we're going to say Thrawn has taken out the rebellion, but now there's another problem, the huge power vacuum, and those Imperials who he's promised to help will be eager to put the chaotic galaxy back in Imperial control, with them at the top of the food chain, so Thrawn's going to have to deal with that. But he knows the Imperial command like the back of his hand, and for this reason I have no doubt that he'd have absolutely no problem whatsoever stabbing them in the back and taking command of their forces. I think realistically Thrawn will butcher the Imperial command until he was the only commander left standing, and although it would be difficult for him to take charge with him being an alien, he'd really be the only option left after defeating both the rebels and the Imperials, so who wouldn't follow him? So Thrawn takes control and he becomes Emperor. What does the galaxy look like? Well, in my opinion, it's going to be pretty much the same. It'll still be an autocracy with a colossal military, but Thrawn would likely be far more tactical. He'd likely not discriminate against aliens and would be less tyrannical than Sidious. Thrawn would likely be a pretty good leader. I mean, he respects different species and cultures, and so long as the inhabitants of the galaxy knew their place, paid their taxes, and accepted Imperial rule, then Thrawn would run a relatively happy and incredibly strong empire. But what do you think an empire under Thrawn would look like, and do you think he'd be a good or a bad emperor? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please like and sub for more content, and follow me on Twitter at The Lore Guy for regular updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.